Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to show you a step-by-step process on how you can get started in making everyday renders inside of Blender. Let's jump in. So before you get started, there's going to be a few things that you might want if you want to recreate something similar to me. And the first thing is you're going to want some VBD Clouds, so voxel data base. Essentially, they're just 3D pixels, and in my case, I use them to create clouds. You can check out our website. It's currently, our cloud pack is currently on sale, so you get over 100 plus clouds, all types of different styles and variations. I created them inside of Houdini. Some are procedural, some were simulated. So for example, these clouds right here were simulated, so you kind of can recreate, we kind of recreated that look of actual like air moving through the cloud. So the first thing you're going to want is some sort of VBD cloud, or you could even create your own inside of Blender. That's totally possible as well. It's going to be a little bit more difficult, and it's going to be a little bit harder to achieve this level of detail, but it's still totally possible. Another thing is, if you are interested, you can check out the Patreon, and I have a full tutorial on how I created this floor surface. We're going to do the basic version of it, but if you want the more advanced version that is fully randomized, you can check out the Patreon tutorial for that, along with the full project file to what we are about to create. Awesome, guys. So now that we covered that, let's jump in and let's get started off. So I always start off with a base scene like this. And this is because I like to work in scale, and I just have our character right here and our camera right here. I'm going to punch Shift A, add in a plane, and then we'll punch Tab S, and let's do 10. Let's do 10 again. So scaled up quite a bit. We're going to scale that back down somewhere right there. That looks pretty good. And the next thing I want to do is I'm just going to frame out our scene. So I'm going to rotate this character, bring him back right there. This is just my default setup, so I always have the camera, and I always have the camera with the track tag. So we can go right here. If we go to camera, we go to object constraints. I am currently constraining this camera to track to this track tag, and that allows me to kind of move this around, and our camera will easily follow. So what we'll do is I think I'm going to punch shift click on both of these, bring them up some, and then I want to bring the camera up quite a bit and back, and I kind of have it like it's looking down on our character right here. That looks pretty interesting. Now what I want to do is I'm going to jump into cycles right here, and real quick, under light paths, we're going to crank up the total bounces to, let's say, 30, and then we're going to take our volume up to, let's say, 12, and then 8 on the glossy and diffuse. This isn't necessarily necessary for this scene. I just always like to do that so I have the same results, and I'm not really getting clamped as far as lighting. Let's punch Shift A again, add in a mesh, and we're going to add in a cylinder. That looks pretty good right there. And then let's just scale the cylinder down. And then I'm going to punch Tab SY. Sorry, Tab SZ. And then we're going to scale it up. And let's bring it in, scale it down some more. Then make sure you punch Tab SZ again. And we're going to scale that up. And then we're just really trying to make this really thin beam of light right here. And that's the goal with this. So you can see our X and Y dimensions right here. Maybe we'll do 0.01 on both of these. 0.01. That's actually too small still, so we'll just try 0.1 on both until we find something that we like. That looks pretty good right there. Awesome. So now what I want to do is I want to just see this rendered out. So I'm just going to go into rendered. We're going to be inside of cycles for this tutorial. And that's because we're going to be working with some volumetrics and some emissive materials. And I just like how cycles looks in general. So let's go ahead and create a new material for this rod right here. And we're just going to call this material light. Awesome. We don't want this to be principled material. There's no need to waste samples on base colors, diffuses, or anything like that. So we're going to delete that, punch Shift A, and search for an emissive material. So we're going to select our emission material, and then we're going to drag that onto the surface right there. And now we have our light, which is awesome. Let's go into these properties right here so you can see it on both sides. What we're going to do is just turn the strength up. That looks good. And then we're going to take this to a pretty red color. It's going to be hard to really tell like what shade of red it's going to be until we start adding in those clouds. So right now you can see on the screen, it's kind of just like this diffuse color is falling off. Of course, like I say, you never should work strictly on lighting without considering the materials of your scene. So let's select on this ground plane right here, and then I'm just going to call this ground. And then what I want to do is add a new material to this ground plane. There we go. You can see how it's already affecting how the scene looks. We're going to bring this base color down for now, and then I want to, let's say, decrease that roughness quite a bit, and then we have something like that. So real quick, I'm going to import some concrete textures, and I'm going to pull in just the material for this floor plane. If you want to recreate the floor in full with full randomization, you can check out the Patreon tutorial below. But for now, we're just going to drop in some just concrete textures from Quixel. Okay guys, so I just imported some concrete textures right here, and then I'm inside of ACES, so I set them up for the ACES color space. We're going to plug in that normal right there. But one thing I want to do is I want to scale this a little bit more so we can get some more detail out of these. These are only 4K, so in this case, you're going to notice some here, and if we zoom in, you can see it right here. You're going to notice a lot of pixelation. So we want to cover that up a little bit, and let's scale up to maybe 4, 4, and 4 on each axis. And then that could probably help add a little bit more surface detail in. That looks a lot better. Something else that I want to do personally is I want to go to this glossy map, Shift A, and I'm going to search for color ramp. And glossy maps are actually the inverse of roughness maps. So if you wanted this material to be photo accurate, then you would want to invert these ramps. However, I like how I've used this material a lot. I really like how it is inverted. I just want to play around and clamp a little bit of the value. So I'm Control Shift click on this. If we remember from some of our last tutorials, if it is black, then it's going to be more reflective, and if it's white, it's going to be more diffuse. In this case, we want a very reflective surface because this floor is playing a big role in this scene. It's going to be reflecting of a lot of light, and it's going to be drawing a lot of attention and detail to the bottom surface right there. So let's go ahead and pull that up some more. That might be too much, but we can always take it back if we need to later. I'm just going to Control Shift click. There we go. That's much more of an interesting surface to me just looking at it. And I'm actually liking that a lot right there. I usually like to rein in this normal map a little bit. So maybe we'll take the strength down to 0.05. And maybe 0.5 is a little bit better. And then Control Shift click. Okay, we're still getting some detail out of it. I think what I'm going to do again is scale this down just a bit more. We did 4. Maybe we can try 6 on all axes. And I just want to avoid seeing pixelation on the screen, which I don't really have a problem with right now. So it's looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and try to frame something out right here. I'm going to bring the camera down. Maybe we'll bring the camera up, and then we'll take the track that the camera's tracking and take that up as well. So now we're kind of positioning our subject in the bottom third of the frame, which is going to allow us to kind of position some more objects in the upper third, which I think I have the perfect solution for that. We're going to add in some clouds, and that's going to also help kind of bounce some light around and kind of fill in some of this negative space, because we're just working with so much negative space currently in this composition. Okay guys, I'm just going to pull in a few clouds from our cloud pack, so feel free to go check that out. It's currently on sale, won't be on sale for much longer. And if not, if you have your own clouds, you can just skip this part and just import them all in, and we'll start kind of framing them inside of our scene. Okay guys, so something you need to know about Blender is a few things, especially when working with volumes. First, to properly see your volume, you actually need to add a principled volume material. So if you just click on your cloud and then you punch new material, it's going to automatically make a principled volume material. That's the first thing. The second thing is when you're importing a volume, you just punch Shift A, import open VDB file. Now this is something that's really important about Blender that other programs usually don't have this issue with. Sometimes Octane does, but Redshift definitely doesn't have this issue. is the larger the volume file, the more your program is going to render slower, also react slower. And actually, in the case of Blender, I found if the VDB file is over 100 megabytes, there's usually a 50% chance that the program will crash when you import it. So make sure you save your project before you start importing all these. And in my case, I'm using my own cloud pack, so throughout this pack for all the clouds, there's different versions. So we have a low, medium, ultra, and high version. And I'm going to stick around the 30 megabytes right here. So I'm going to be sticking with the 33 megabytes right here. So this is going to be the high for Cloud 3 in this cloud pack. Just keep that in mind. If you're running into issues with it crashing or not rendering fast enough or not rendering properly, make sure you add the principal volume. Make sure it's connected to the volume output, but also make sure your clouds aren't too much, their file sizes aren't too large. Especially if you're rendering on the GPU, you will run out of VRAM. So with all that being said, there's a little disclaimer right there. Make sure you pull in clouds that are decently sized, so there's enough resolution, but not too much to where you could start getting some crashing and some really, really slow rendering and response times. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to go to our color right here, and I'm going to crank this up to a wider value, and it's just going to scatter more right there. Also, we could play around with some of these others. There's temperature. That's only for explosions. Black body tint. That's these two are for emissions. Then we have absorption color, so we could add in some white right there as well. Take that saturation and hue out, and then we're going to just absorb, not full white, but pretty close. And then here's another big thing right here. Like I said, you want to make sure your volume bounces are up to 12. There we go. Now we're getting a much more realistic rendering of this cloud. Maybe we'll take them up to 15 in this case, just because this is so heavy with volumes. So now I'm just going to scale this cloud up. And that looks pretty good right there. Maybe sync it down some. Punch Shift A, import open VDB file. I'm going to go back to the cloud location. And then I'm going to go, this is just abstract clouds right here. There's a few that I really like. I think we'll do cloud 5. In this case, the ultra is 92 and the high is 41. I think we'll go with the high. Okay guys, so I've placed some of the clouds in our scene. I turned off viewport denoising so we can make out a little bit more detail. And now we're really just doing some final touches on this scene itself. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to pull this light up all the way. And I actually don't want it intersecting with the floor. I find when you have emissive materials intersecting with other geometry, it tends to produce more fireflies and noise. It just makes it a little bit harder for the render engine to render everything out. So I'm going to pull it up a little bit, just a little bit off the floor. And then along with that, what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to frame our camera down a bit more. Something like that right there. Looks pretty good. And then as I see this render out, I think I want to take this cylinder that we have right here, and then I'm going to change the dimensions to 0.05. Essentially the radius of it on the X and Y axis. I'll keep it the same height, but I just don't want it to be so prominent in the scene. I really want a lot of that prominence to come through in post-processing with the bloom. So that looks pretty good right there. I like that a lot. We'll go to this color and we're going to crank the value up all the way. It doesn't matter with emissive materials. The value is not really going to affect the color of the light coming off of it. It's just going to affect the brightness. I want to strictly control the brightness of the light through strength. So I just turn the value all the way up. And then saturation will affect this light though. So you can see what happens when we make it hyper saturated. That's a very cool look. Maybe we'll swing that a little towards red. Not too much, maybe right there. And we'll find something like that. Pull the saturation down just a bit. That looks good. Now I think we can take that strength. Let's see, we'll keep that value of 1 right there. Take that strength down a bit, or the saturation down. Make sure that value stays at 1. And we're just trying to find a color that can suit the scene. There we go. That looks pretty good. Now, obviously, this light is a little too bright, so let's cut it in half and see what we're working with. Okay, that looks pretty good as well. What I want to do is I'm going to take this base diffuse color right here. I'm going to add a brightness and contrast node. And I want the reflections to be more prominent in the scene. And to do that, we could either do that by making the surface more reflective. However, I'm pretty happy with the reflectivity of the surface. So we can take the brightness of the surface, and as we bring it down, you can see the reflections are much more prominent. Now in this case, I don't want to take it all the way down to 0. And then I'll probably take the contrast down just a bit as well, so it's not too punchy. And then I'm going to punch. So you can do viewport rendering, or like preview box rendering inside of Blender with Control B. So I'm going to put Control B right there. And I just want to see our floor surface. And this is going to be a good time while that's rendering to kind of organize everything. So I'm going to get out of scene collection. I'm going to go to view layer. I'm going to add all these clouds to the geo collection for now. And then I'm going to make a new collection. So left click, new collection right there. And then I'm going to call this our volume collection. So that looks good right there. And then I'm just going to drop that under our geometry. Shift click on these volumes and then drop them right there. That way I can do something like this and then render everything out much faster and get much more detail. So I'm going to punch Control Alt B to get out of that box view. Oh, looks like we missed a volume right there, so I'm going to drop that in. And you can see how much faster Blender renders without volumes. So I'm going to mess around with this floor material just a bit. I really like the detail we're getting out of it though. Maybe we'll take the brightness up just a bit. Okay, I'm happy with that. Roughness, that looks really sharp right there. I like that a lot. Perhaps we could play around with the specular if we wanted to. I'm just going to pull it all the way up. That looks good. And then, you know, I'm really not loving how this light is kind of falling off like this. Maybe we can increase the strength a bit. Okay, we're at 50 right now. Let's try 75 perhaps. So we'll do 75 right there. Okay, I like that a lot more. We'll go back to 100. In this case, we might need to take, okay, let's keep going. Let's try 300. I like that a lot more because we can see more of the scene. Let's try 500. Okay, that's interesting right there. Let's bring in the volumes. And you can see they're just going to slow the scene down so much. And Blender's going to have to load them back into the RAM, or the VRAM. Okay, there we go. So obviously we can't do 500 in this case because all those volumes are kind of bouncing everything around, but it was a good look. Let's go back down to 100. You know, that looks pretty good right there. There is one last thing that I want to do, and that is add a depth of field. I always add a depth of field because no matter what, even if you're shooting at f/22 on a real camera, you're going to have some sort of depth of field. So, you know, I don't want to just give away that this is CG right off the bat. Let's at least try to make it as convincing as possible, even though this is more of an abstract piece. So we'll go to our camera right here, and then we can go to our camera tab. Depth of field, check. I already have a focus object because I do this all the time, so I just did a focus object, same thing, track to focus, and then right there. We do f-stop as 7. You know, I don't want it to be too extreme. I want the user to be able to see the foreground and background. I mean, the background is what is interesting, but still be focused on there, so I think that's pretty good. And then what I want to do is I want to just take this light that we have. Oh, there we go. There's an issue right there. Our cylinder, I did not scale right. So I did 5. I need to do 0.05 right there. There we go. That's going to look a lot better. Okay, so something was wrong right there, and that was the problem. So that looks pretty good. Now we can turn the strength back up. Maybe we could do 150 on this light. Just enough to fill in the scene. And then I want to make sure we have enough clouds kind of in the background. That looks good. Now let's take this beam of light and let's almost touch the surface. So something like that right there. And then it might be interesting if our character, we'll just play around with the camera, if our character right here intersects with that beam of light. And we could do that two ways. We could do that one way by bringing the camera down like this. I don't like that though. I want to look up kind of from above, like we have an upward perspective on our character. So we'll bring that down right there. And then we can mess with this track. And I'm going to pull the track up just a bit. And then if we wanted to, we could take all of this right here and our camera, and then we can pull this back some. I rather like that. I like that a lot more right there. And then what we could do is just take our camera back even more, go to our camera settings right here. We can do a focal length of 80, and that looks pretty nice right there. Let's take that track right here, pull that down, and we're getting some issues with our clouds. Now this is not an issue of the voxels of the clouds, it's actually an issue of, and we'll go right here. So let's see, volumes, max steps, let's do 4096 right there. And that should help resolve some of those voxels at least a little bit. So that looks pretty good right there. Let's zoom in or pull up some. There we go. So that's how you can create this render really quickly inside of Blender. It's super simple. There are not a lot of steps, and you could definitely like play around with your camera angle, try to find like a more interesting composition, or even framing, or even just go freestyle and try to create your own render from scratch using similar techniques and ideas that we went over in this tutorial. So guys, again, thank you so much for watching. If you want to support the channel, you can check out the Patreon below. We're posting weekly videos, project files, and other really cool things on there. Also, if you want to, you can check out this cloud pack at the link below as well. It's another great way to support the channel and get something really awesome in return. So guys, again, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and peace out. I'll see you next week.